How and where did transcontinental colonization start? European colonization began in the 15th century with the Age of Discovery. It was a period of intense exploration and colonization as European explorers sought to find trade routes and new lands to plunder. The colonial era was made possible by several factors, including advances in shipbuilding and navigation, as well as a growing interest in land development and access to the resources of other nations on other continents. One of the most important factors in the beginning of European colonization was the development of new technologies such as the compass, carol, and astrolabe. These technologies allowed European explorers to travel further and more safely than before. They also allowed explorers to chart new trade routes and navigate unfamiliar waters. Another important factor in the beginning of European colonization was the growing interest in trade. European traders were eager to find new sources of goods and spices such as gold, silver, and pepper. They also wanted to find new markets for their goods. European kings also had eyes on other lands because they hoped to expand their empires and increase their wealth by dominating and plundering other nations. The Age of Discovery began in 1415 when Portuguese explorer Henry the Navigator captured the North African city of Ceuta. This victory was the beginning of the expansion of Portuguese colonialism towards Africa and Asia. In 1488, another Portuguese, Bartolomeu Dias, was the first European to reach the Cape of Good Hope, opening a new sea route to India. In 1492, Italian explorer Christopher Columbus sailed west across the Atlantic in search of a new route to Asia. Instead, his ship docked in America, which he believed was part of Asia. For this reason, he considered native people of the Americas as Indians. Columbus' voyages marked the beginning of European colonization in the Americas. In the following years, European explorers continued to explore and colonize new lands in the Americas, Africa, and Asia. Spain and Portugal were the two leading colonial powers in the early 16th century. However, other European countries such as England, France, and the Netherlands soon began occupying colonies. European colonialism had a profound effect on the world. This led to the spread of European culture, language, and religion in all parts of the world. It also led to the exploitation of the resources and people of the colonized lands and caused the world to be shaped unfairly. One of the most negative effects of European colonialism was on the African continent. Most African countries were colonized, and as the wealth of European countries increased, these countries became poorer and poorer. Between 1885 and 1914, Britain exploited nearly 30% of Africa's population. And 15% was looted by France, 11% by Portugal, 9% by Germany, 7% by Belgium, and 1% of the whole continent by Italy. The era of development and European colonialism are complex and controversial issues. The increase in wealth and prosperity in the west of this continent on the one hand led to the advancement of science and technology and the expansion of European culture and thoughts. On the other hand, they also led to the expansion of the conquest and exploitation of indigenous peoples and the transatlantic slave trade. In addition to taking the wealth of the colonies and taxing them heavily, European countries separated children, youth, and men from their families and tribes and used them for work in war in other regions and even continents. For example, in the cotton plantations in North America, slaves transported from Africa were often hired by the British. African slaves were transported by ships from the ocean under very difficult conditions, and many of these slaves died of starvation and disease on the ships and did not reach America. The use of free African labor caused the cultivation and harvesting of cotton and the sale of linen fabrics in the European markets by the United States, which was a fledgling and newly independent country at that time, and quickly turned this country into a nascent economic power. African peoples suffered centuries of slavery, oppression, and exploitation by European colonialists. European imperialist powers officially divided this continent among themselves in the Conference of 1885/1264 in Berlin. They stole the political and economic sovereignty from the people of this continent without asking them for their opinions. The surplus value obtained from this continent with such exploitation was exported to the colonial countries. This process enriched the European colonialists at the expense of Africa as a whole, creating conditions of underdevelopment of the continent, which, as Michael Parenti described, could be the natural end of the process of overexploitation. If you like this type of videos, follow Deep View channel so that you don't miss the next videos, and by activating the bell, you will be notified as soon as the next videos. Even after the independence movements of the mid-20th century in Africa, all industries and mineral rights of African countries remained largely in the hands of multinational monopolies and trusts based in colonial countries, and despite the independence of African nations, they maintained the systematic exploitation of Africa at its core, a phenomenon that it was called New Colonialism. For example, all the iron ore produced in the country of Swaziland, located in southern Africa, was owned by the Swaziland Iron Ore Development Company, SIAC, after the country gained political independence. Despite the nominal independence of the country, this company, which had the monopoly of iron ore production, was jointly owned by capitalists of the United States and the United Kingdom. Switzerland-based mining and trading company Glencore is currently the largest cobalt miner in the world, and the largest mines of this metal are mined in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Burkina Faso and Mali are the fourth and third largest producers of gold in Africa, along with abundant reserves of copper and other rare minerals. Burkina Faso's gold industry alone generates at least $2 billion in annual profits, most of which goes to Canadian and Australian mining companies, while 40% of Burkina Faso's population lives below the poverty line. These examples represent the fact that the looting of the people and the African continent by Western imperialism is now a colonial project with ongoing genocide and is not simply a part of past history. It is important to remember that European colonization was a global event and had and continues to have a profound impact on all the peoples involved around the world. It is also important to learn from the past so that we can create a fairer and more just future for all.